This interview is being conducted with Reid Sumner Anderson. He served in World War II. His highest rank achieved was E7 Master Sergeant. And the current location of this interview is Woodland, California. And the interviewer's name is Rowan Stewart. This interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress as part of the Da Vinci High School America at War project. Alright, so, Mr. Anderson, I would like to start off with where you were born.
I was born in Logan, Utah, June the 29th, 1919, at 3:30 in the morning.
What were your parents' occupations?
My mother was a housewife. She had 11 children, and my father was a painter.
What was the gender of your different siblings?
Yeah, I had 7 sisters and 3 brothers. There was 11 children. All of the sisters' names started with M.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
Before I went to the service, I was working at the Western Union as a Western Union telegram delivery boy. I was 19.
Did you have any other family members who served in the military?
Yes, I have 2 brothers that served. Both of them were air pilots in the Air Force.
So how did you enter the service, draft or enlistment?
I enlisted out of Santa Barbara, and the enlistment place was San Pedro. From there I was sent to Fort Lewis, Washington.
If enlistment, why and the reason for choosing the specific brand of service? Specific branch? So, did you get to choose your branch?
No, I didn't get to choose. I was sent to the infantry.
Okay. What was your departure date for training camp?
Well, that's where and when I got to Fort Lewis, and which would have been the next day after I enlisted, that's when I started my, what do you want to call it, the recruit duty, I guess.
So what were your early days of training like?
They weren't as bad as they were in the later years. Some of them were pretty tough. Like Fort Lewis was a nice place. It had sunshine 30 days a year. The rest of the time it rained. And usually in the infantry they would take you out at 5 o'clock in the morning for a 5-mile hike before you come back to eat breakfast.
Did you have any specialized training?
Yeah, I had specialized training in when I got out. Well, in the service after the war, I had it. I was it was PI, which is photograph intelligence stuff. We looked at the photos that the planes took in a 3D perspective to find out what was on the ground.
Why was that an important job?
It was to identify what was there and what the enemy had.
So how was it adapting to military life? Physical regimens? Was that difficult?
No, it was fine.
How about the food, the living conditions in the Army?
They were fine. I had no problems with it. Some people did, but I had no problem. Coming from a large family, it was fine. No problem.
How was the social situation in the Army?
Well, we got out, but we couldn't leave camp in the early days unless you had a written out pass to go to town. Otherwise, you had to stay on the base.
Did you feel like you made many friends in the Army or had any connections?
Yes, I did. I made a lot of friends in the Army, and during the wartime, I didn't lose any of them. I think 1 or 2 people got killed when I was overseas.
So where did you serve overseas?
I first started serving in Africa, which we invaded in Africa, and then we went all through Africa, and then we invaded in Sicily, and then we invaded in Italy, and there I was wounded in the chest. I had a machine gun fired through the chest. I spent 6 months in the hospital back in Africa, and when I got well, they were going to send me home, but they decided they had sicker people than me, so they asked me where I wanted to go, so I went back to the front lines again in Anzio Beachhead. There I was back 2 days, and I got wounded in the leg again.
So, could you tell me a little bit more about the Africa campaign, your experiences there?
Well, it was pretty interesting. When we landed there, everybody knows of George Patton, I'm sure, and he was the commander-in-chief of the landing of Africa. And a little before that, I didn't mention it, I guess, when I was in Fort Lewis, President Eisenhower, who was also four-star general, or five-star general in the war, I worked as his radio operator in 1940 when he was a lieutenant colonel. It was amazing that he turned around from a lieutenant colonel within 3 years to be a five-star general. But I worked with him.
And the invasion of Sicily, were there any strange encounters there?
Yes, there were some very, very strange encounters in Sicily, and if you'll get it, it's in the book I have here, and also in the records, I'm sure. That's when we invaded over. The Air Force and the Army and the Navy were like individualists. They didn't, in those days, cooperate with each other. So they had some paratroopers land when we were in Sicily. And it was dark time, and we were firing back and forth at each other, and the paratroopers that landed we thought were Germans, but they weren't, they were Americans. So we were shooting at each other in Sicily. And that's a known thing. And otherwise, it wasn't too bad. We went through Sicily very fast. I think 30 days. Jake?
Do you remember much about the civilians that were living in Sicily at the time?
We didn't get much contact with them. We were moving so fast. They all lived. Sicily was a funny place. I don't think there was any flat land there at all. All the little towns were built up on the hill. Cars couldn't even go up the road. They were just bicycle tracks, or cart tracks. And when I was in Sicily, I was also in charge of mules. I had 5 mules, and the mules were used to haul all the stuff over the hills with, because they were a sure-footed animal.
How was the experience on the front line at that time?
Well, I didn't get I got up there, but I didn't get an actually firing contact only 2 or 3 times. And the one time is when I got wounded, and I was behind a little creek and there was a cement bridge across there, and we were parked right at the end of the bridge. The creek was dry at the time, and they were firing us, so we got down behind the bridge, and I had to get my weapon off of the Jeep, so I had to crawl down around and sneak back and getting fired at, get my machine gun off of the Jeep to set it up to fire back at them. And we had a water-cooled machine gun, which was Nazi people don't understand. We went to that war over there with mostly World War I equipment, outdated.
So did you feel like at any point during these first 2 campaigns your squadron was outmatched,
No, I never did feel that. We think we were in charge at all times, it seemed like. We weren't being pushed back or anything like this.
Mm-hmm. And you also mentioned a campaign on Italy in general. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, the Italian campaign was, we laid wire. I was in communications, what my job was. We had reels of wire set up on the back of the vehicle, and we'd run it down the line and take it to the next command where it was going to go. And we'd have to run out of wire, so we'd have to pick up wire. And we'd have one guy running down the road with a big stick hanging in the creek or the ditch, pulling the wire out to wind it back up so we'd get some more wire as we advanced on. And we'd lay in one wire, and we'd come around the corner, and we'd picking up a wire, and we had to stop all at once and sort of cut the wire and back off, because we were infantry, and the artillery section was laying wire ahead, and we were picking up their wire. So that was pretty funny.
Was that at all near any gunfire? Were you in any danger when you were laying the wire, or was that pretty far away?
Only one time. That's when I got hit. When I got hit, so only one time when we really got under heavy fire. Otherwise, we were a little bit we weren't quite on that we were there, but we weren't quite into the front line. We weren't hand-to-hand combat.
Mm-hmm. And so, what else? Any other kind of general experiences in the war or memorable encounters?
Well, it's nothing great, I guess. We had lousy rations. The military food in the Second War was poor.